Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. The Missouri Legislature's 2025 session ends on May 16th, and Republicans are pushing to get a new version of what they call the Second Amendment Preservation Act passed. Last week, representatives from police departments in Branson, Rolla, and others testified against it. Kayvon Mansouri is an investigative reporter with the Midwest Newsroom. He is based in St. Louis. He is tracking this bill and joins us now. Welcome back, Kayvon.
Thank you for having me.
So for context, wasn't the original Second Amendment Preservation Act quickly signed by then Governor Mike Parson, who was a former sheriff, but then struck down by the courts as unconstitutional?
That's right. The original law was signed in 2021 by the former governor, but very quickly, Joe Biden's Department of Justice, as well as St. Louis and Kansas City, brought lawsuits against the law, saying basically it violated the Constitution. And eventually that reached a federal judge, which did rule it unconstitutional, saying that it violated the Supremacy Clause, which basically what the law was doing was saying that the federal laws were null and void in Missouri, which it can't do. And a Court of Appeals three-judge panel basically ruled in favor of that. So since then, the law has been struck down and is unconstitutional according to the federal courts.
So isn't Missouri's current Attorney General Andrew Bailey still fighting this in court, appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court to reconsider or overturn this ruling?
That's right. The Supreme Court actually decided they weren't going to take this up, but Bailey has been appealing that, trying to get the Supreme Court to take it up, to consider it, to try to get that law back onto their schedule. So he wants to keep the original law alive while the Republicans, the legislature, are currently pushing this new law.
So how is this new version by Dixon's representative Bill Hardwick different? Is it all in the wording or the way the phrasing is arranged?
Yeah, basically the first law, as I said before, basically said that it ruled that federal gun laws were null and void in Missouri, meaning that police, it would be illegal for police to enforce them and possibly illegal for them to do a whole lot of other things with federal law enforcement agencies. What the new law does is it doesn't say that it's illegal, that these federal gun laws are not the rule of the land. Instead, it says it's the public policy of Missouri police officers or officers in Missouri to not enforce federal gun laws. So say a police chief in any state, any city throughout the area, it would be not the policy of the state for them to work with federal law enforcement or to enforce federal gun laws.
So with these changes, why do police departments that you have listened to testify and also talk to still oppose it?
Yeah, I mean, they're really concerned about the confusion that this law can make and what it does and does not allow them to do. The original law and the current law, they are basically the same in the description of what they, the sort of what these law enforcement agencies can and can't do when it comes to working with federal law enforcement agencies, with actually enforcing certain federal laws. And the main thing is, every law enforcement agency throughout the state, basically throughout the country, really works with federal law enforcement in some way, whether it be through gun trace databases or on task force when federal law enforcement agencies are trying to do a certain thing. And that is a big part of how they solve crimes and things like that. And these police chiefs and a lot of law enforcement officials throughout the state basically say this law is going to make it really difficult, if not impossible, to have those partnerships, to work on those things together. And it's also going to cause a lot of confusions for law enforcement officers who are doing their day-to-day job. Because what this law basically allows people to do is, if someone feels that a law enforcement agency in Missouri, if this law passes, if they believe that they have enforced federal gun laws, they can bring a $50,000 lawsuit against that agency. And not only, and that can be whether they're working with federal gun or federal law enforcement, or if they believe they're enforcing federal gun laws. So those lawsuits really have police officers, their legal counsel, as well as their insurers sort of fearful of what could come if this law passes.
So you also talked to a St. Louis-based attorney who regularly works with police departments across the state. What is his opinion about all this? Does he say they should support it or continue to oppose it?
No, he says they should not support it. He, again, is saying that they are going to be liable for to these lawsuits, these $50,000 lawsuits that can really leave them open to who knows how much. And he's basically told the cities that he works with Ellisville, Missouri, and some other places that they should, if this law passes, they should stop their work with federal agencies, federal law enforcement agency, I should say. And basically, yeah, if the law passes, that's what it's going to look like. I think a lot of law enforcement throughout the state are looking at that possible future. That's if the law itself isn't called into question of the legality again.
Sure. So the Republicans who support this new legislation and Hardwick, do they think that it will improve the collaboration between local police and the Highway Patrol and the ATF?
You know, it's hard to say. I don't think so. I think the belief, a lot of, at least from what I've seen of the proponents of the law, and that doesn't really include legislators, but the people, sort of the people in the background who are pushing, is they don't like the ATF. They don't want, they don't believe that police departments in the state should be working with federal law enforcement at all. And they said they should be really just focusing on the laws that are in Missouri, and what they should, that's what they should be supporting.
So is there pushback in other states that have tried to get this law on the books?
Yeah, in fact, there have been several states that have picked up this law. I think in Wyoming, the governor recently vetoed a Second Amendment Preservation Act law. And the law has been pushed in a lot of different places, some with success, but I would say Missouri has sort of been like the hot button, you know, because there's been so much legal back and forth. There's been a lot of questions about, you know, again, the supremacy clause, what is constitutional, what is not. But yeah, there has been pushback in other states. I would say probably the biggest one would be in Wyoming, where the governor recently vetoed the law.
Okay. Well, before you go, do police and others who oppose this new version, which has now made it to the Missouri Senate, feel like that lawmakers in Jeff City just aren't listening to them?
Yeah, you know, Ellisville Police Chief Steve Lewis, who is a part of the Missouri's Law Enforcement Legal Coalition, or Legislative Coalition, I'm sorry. He said that basically they have tried really hard to work with Republicans. They've put together 4 bills that have basically a Second Amendment Preservation bill, sort of rough drafts that would say this would answer our questions, this would solve the concerns we have, and that's gone to no avail. Basically, he said that he called the bill anti-cop, even while it's being pushed by Republican legislators as pro-cop, and basically said that, you know, he and his 30 some odd years in law enforcement has never had such a problem with, you know, working with legislators on a bill that is being sort of pushed as a pro-cop bill, but they are not interested, according to him, with actually working with police.
All right, we will leave it there for now. We've been talking with KY3 Missouri with the Midwest Newsroom. You can see his reports on NPR stations in Missouri and also throughout social media, as well as this conversation on KY3.com, the KY3 News app, Roku, Fire Stick, and Apple TV+. KY, thanks very much for joining us. Look forward to next time, as always.
Thank you for having me.